everyone, my name's Hazel and I'm an author and a PhD student, and in today's video we're going to be doing another Miraculous Ladybug video, and this time we are going to be ranking from best to worst all of the episodes in series 1. Now I have seen this show all the way through about 3 times now, but it's actually been a while since I have seen series 1, so I did go back and rewatch it this week. And it was very stressful because whilst there are only like 24, 26 episodes, I am a PhD student, I do have a job. I had to watch the full series on 1.5 speed whilst doing PhD work whilst going to work. So yeah, it was very stressful, but I did kind of enjoy it in a way because it has been a while since I have seen the first series of Miraculous, so I did really enjoy it. So when I say best to worst, by no means do I think any of these episodes are terrible, but in comparison to what I've ranked as the best, there are some episodes that just aren't as good in my opinion. And I was initially going to do 2 separate videos on this, so one on how well I just liked each episode as a viewer, and then how well I thought some of the episodes were written. However, how well an episode is written does actually kind of tie into my enjoyment of the episode. That's just the way I am because of how much I like writing. If something isn't well written, that generally doesn't make it very enjoyable anyway, but generally those two things really do kind of tie together. Whilst with character I can separate how well written something is and how much I like a character, not so much with plot. So I would love to know what you think of all the episodes in series 1. What's your favourite, what's your least favourite, and with that being said, let's get started. Okay, so the worst episode in my opinion, and again when I say worst I don't mean bad, I just mean in comparison to the other ones it's not as good, would have to be Annie-Man. It is kind of boring, and also if we compare it to the episodes it comes directly after, which is Origins and Stoneheart, it's not really as good. When you write something like a TV show, like Miraculous, in that it has stand-alone episodes where a lot of the plot doesn't really link together, you kind of need to consider what order you're going to put the episodes in, as that can really affect the flow and people's enjoyment of the show. The structure, you gotta look carefully at the structure. So I don't really feel like Annie-Man is in the right place. Following 2 really strong episodes, I won't tell you what spot they're in, but they're a lot higher on the list than Annie-Man is. And I think maybe another part of the reason why I dislike this episode is because of Nino. As we all know, I'm not the biggest fan of Luca, but my feelings towards Luca are really because of Luca's feelings towards Marinette. Because I want Adrien and Marinette to get together so badly, I'm not a big fan of any characters that try and jeopardise that. Kind of the same reason why I dislike Chloe a bit, dislike Lila, dislike Kagami. That's where I'm at with that, sorry. I also think another reason why this episode is kind of boring, so if you don't know, because a lot of people don't seem to know, the Akuma victim in this episode is actually Alia's dad, or at the very least a relative of Alia. However, I don't believe we really see him again until maybe the Christmas episode, or when Etta and Ella get akumatized, or when Alia's older sister, whose name I've forgotten, gets akumatized either. We don't see him again and we don't really know much of him before he gets akumatized. So as a viewer we have no emotional connection to him, not like when another character gets akumatized. If, for example, we take Alia when she gets akumatized in Lady Wi-Fi, we have a much stronger connection to her because we know a lot more about Alia than we know about Alia's relative. It's just, you lack the emotional connection, so it does kind of make the episode boring and a bit lackluster. Next on the list is Gamer, and again it was kind of boring, a bit like Annie-Man, and honestly even though Max has been in the show, in the class, for quite a lot of episodes by the time Gamer is on, so I rewatched the show on Netflix and I believe Gamer is episode 22, so it's towards the end, so you've seen a great deal of Max already. I do think he is one of the more boring characters in Miraculous, so it wasn't that compelling. I didn't really care that much about him when he got akumatized, which sounds a bit harsh, but just how I feel, sorry. The only thing that really saved this episode and why Annie-Man isn't in front of it is because Adrien and Marinette get to interact with each other as Adrien Agreste and Marinette dupain-cheng. The best episodes in my opinion in all of Miraculous, not just series 1, are the episodes where Adrien and Marinette get to talk to each other and have some sort of interaction and relationship development together. So that's the only reason why Gamer is higher than Annie-Man, to be honest. Up next is the Pharaoh, and honestly this episode is a little bit forgettable actually. So last night I finished watching all the episodes, then this morning I put together a list of best to worst, what order I'd put them in. I missed the pharaoh off the first time. When I was going through to check, I was like, oh, I missed off the pharaoh and the mime as well. I missed them both off. And I'm not 100% sure why I do find the pharaoh so forgettable, because first of all, it takes place at the Louvre, which is obviously a really, in my opinion, a really cool landmark. Apparently a lot of French people don't like it, but I like the look of it. So it's a massive monument whether you like it or not. And also I think the Akuma is really cool. I don't know how accurate it is, I don't really know anything about Egyptian gods. However, it's a really cool akumatization. I also think the way the Akuma is resolved, or Jalil, the person who gets akumatized, is saved, is a really unique idea as well. And again, like the other episodes, I don't actually think we see Jalil before this, and I don't think we've actually seen him since this episode. So again, as a viewer, you have no real emotional connection to him as an Akuma victim. Like, the people really care that much about Jalil. No offense to Jalil, I'm sure he's lovely. The only thing I feel like was such a bad cop-out in this episode, and I remember thinking this the first time I watched this when I rewatched it back and remembered what happened, is the history book dropping. So if you don't remember, if it's been a while since you've seen it, is Ladybug is fighting an Akuma at the start of the episode, and for whatever reason she has her school history book with her and she drops it, and Alia finds it and puts it on the Ladybug. And Alia also finds out that DuPont High School is the only school in Paris that uses that book, so Ladybug has to go to DuPont. However, by the end of the episode, Marinette does manage to steal the book back. However, no one ever brings this history book back up again, and I feel like it's such a missed opportunity. Like, why wouldn't you bring this book back up again? And when I first saw this episode, I was like, oh my god, Ali's gonna find out that her best friend is Ladybug. And then Alia commences to do absolutely nothing about it. So yeah, I think that was a massive cop-out. Like, I want them to maybe revisit this in a future episode. Up next is Guitar Villain, and well done to Jagged Stone for being given possibly the worst ever Akuma villain name out of all of it, Miraculous. I don't think it's a very good name, but the name aside for now, it's an okay episode. There isn't really much at stake at first, and actually Jagged Stone actively runs away from Ladybug and Cat Noir in order to get revenge on Mr. XY. He doesn't really try and go after and get Ladybug or Chat Noir's Miraculouses, which I think is interesting because we actually see in this series, and to my knowledge, I don't think we actually see it in series 2 or 3, that Hawkmoth can actually like hurt his Akuma victims if they don't do what he says. I think we see it in Evil Illustrator and maybe in Pixelator as well. But he doesn't do it to Jagged Stone, and I just thought that was interesting. The only kind of interesting thing about this episode is we get to see Marinette and her designs and what Marinette's true passion is, and that's the only reason why this episode is so high on this ranking list. Up next is Copycat, and again this episode is a little bit forgettable, a bit like Pharaoh, but I will tell you why this one's forgettable. I know why this one is forgettable. Is because, so generally, I feel for me and for other people when I talk to my one friend who likes Miraculous, when you think of a Miraculous Ladybug episode, the episode is named after the Akuma villain. So what the Akuma looks like is kind of tied to what makes you think about that episode. However, the Akuma villain in this looks exactly like Chat Noir, and don't get me wrong, I love Chat Noir's outfit. I think it's probably my favourite outfit out of all the superheroes in Miraculous. But by making the Akuma look like Chat Noir, like, it does make the episode kind of forgettable. As the episode started, I was like, oh yeah, okay, I do remember this episode with the sculpture and Ladybug not showing up, I remember it. But then I was like, but what does the Akuma look like? I was like, I can't remember, and that's because he looks like Chat Noir. So I did a previous video talking about the outfits of Miraculous Ladybug, I'll link it down below and above. But it was kind of like about the outfits and how they elicit a lot about a certain character, and also I guess the villains as well, even though I didn't really cover the villains in that one, just the main characters. But that's kind of the reason why this episode is forgettable, because the villain looks like Chat Noir. So yeah, it was an odd choice to make, especially now since like especially since each episode is named after each Akuma villain. So it's a bit odd really. Up next is Pixelator, and I did think it was a kind of an interesting episode in how the Pixelator, whose real name I have forgotten, I'm so sorry, it's really bad considering I've only just watched this, but how he captured people and they ended up in like a photo in this weird kind of limbo situation. That was interesting about it. However, again, we don't know this person, don't know much about him. so it wasn't emotionally compelling. We don't have any emotional attachment to the man who got akumatized. So it did kind of make it boring in comparison for that reason. However, we do get to see Marinette's work ethic for Jagged Stone. I think that's a really good thing to see. Again, a bit like the other episode that I was talking about before. Don't get me wrong, Marinette does do some really embarrassing things, and I see a lot of other videos made by other YouTubers who do Miraculous Ladybug content, and they're always calling Marinette out and saying she's not a very good role model, she does all these really questionable things. And yeah, don't get me wrong, she does do these questionable things. However, Marinette, in series 1 anyway, is only 13 years old. She's still a child. She's not much older than the target audience for the show, and the majority of people making videos on Marinette are grown adults like me. I'm 24 years old. So whilst it's great to have a role model who is a good person, to me Marinette is a good person, and it's not a good thing, in my opinion, to have a role model not make mistakes and not be able to redeem themselves, because that should be something children are also taught. If you aren't aware for children's television, I've said it a few times in these Miraculous videos, but generally children's television is there to teach the child an important lesson. It can be something like eat healthy food. For example, when I was growing up, there was a show on in England called Big Cook Little Cook, and it was all about healthy eating and how to make healthy meals and stuff like that. There are other shows as well. For example, I had Fireman Sam, and it was essentially promoting being a firefighter to children. So whilst I think probably the purpose of Miraculous Ladybug for children is to teach children to be good and to have Marinette and Adrien as role models, it's also not a good thing for Adrien or Marinette to never make mistakes, because children also need to learn. You're gonna make mistakes, but you can redeem them, and I feel like series 1 Marinette anyway, for every mistake she makes, she does, I think, pretty much always redeem herself in some way, and to me Marinette is a very good character. I actually, in some of my other Miraculous Ladybug videos, I've said I don't feel like the writers really like Marinette. You can kind of tell they like Adrien more than her, and whilst I stand by that and that I do think they do like Adrien more than her, I don't feel like the writers hates Marinette, at least not in series 1 anyway. I'll have to watch the other 2 series, which I will do after this one. At least in series 1, they definitely don't hate Marinette. She gets to do a lot of cool stuff, and I would argue she has a lot more screen time than Adrien. She is the main character, and for all intents and purposes he is more of the love interest, who is also her like sidekick at the same time. He's less of a main character than her in series 1 anyway. He doesn't really do as much as she does. So I do kind of take back saying that series 1 Marinette, at the very least, the writers did like her. Up next is Simon Says, and not gonna lie, I completely forgot this episode existed. However, like, why did I do that? Because when I rewatched it, I had the time of my life, because if you've forgotten as well, let me just inform you, towards the end of the episode we get to see Gabriel Agreste, and I think he's on the top of the TVI building pretending he's an aeroplane. How did I ever forget that? And honestly, that is the only reason why this episode is higher up than Pixelator, because of Gabriel Agreste acting like an aeroplane. He's really funny. I think it's great. And there's also some good interaction between Ladybug and Chat Noir from a writer's perspective. They have some really good, funny, witty dialogue. I'm not gonna lie, I do feel like series 1 Ladybug does definitely have a crush on Chat Noir. They were flirting so much, and at no point does she ever really seem that annoyed by it. It is kind of cute, and it just really gives me hope that one day the love square will come to real life. That's the weirdest way. It will happen, yeah. I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know how to phrase things, I'm sorry. Up next is The Bubbler. Now for The Bubbler. I don't think it's a bad episode. However, this was the first ever episode of Miraculous Ladybug I ever saw. Now, when you sometimes Google Miraculous, Stormy Weather comes up as the first episode. However, I watched this on Netflix, and on the UK Netflix, for whatever reason, I don't know what order they aired in the UK, but for whatever reason, The Bubbler is listed as first, and you know, like a normal person, if it says series 1 episode 1, I'm gonna watch series 1 episode 1 first when I start watching the show. And The Bubbler almost made me stop watching the show, because it's not a very good episode to open on. If this episode was somewhere else in the series, it would have been a good episode, an okay episode. It's not the best episode of Miraculous, but because it comes first, it is the worst opening episode ever. I can appreciate the writers wanting to do something different by starting in the middle of the school year, when Adrien and Marinette have already got their kwamis and got their powers. I can appreciate that. but it shouldn't have been the bubbler as the first episode. Maybe you did watch Show Me Weather first, which is a lot higher on this list, and I think that would have been a great opening episode if they really didn't want to have the origins as first, if they wanted to do something different. But the bubbler is a bad first episode in my opinion. Everyone was really cringy in the episode as well. It was like, ugh, that's kind of the reason why I nearly stopped watching it. I was like, this is what I acted like when I was 14. I mean, it's probably accurate, but I was just like, oh, it was so cringy. I really didn't like the bubbler. So it's an okay episode, but it shouldn't have been the first episode. At least not in the order I saw it in. Just wish Netflix could, you like, switch it with Stormy Weather, because bubbler as episode 2 would be fine, but Stormy Weather would be a great episode to start. We'll talk more about Stormy Weather when we get to it though. Up next is Princess Fragrance. Now, whilst we do have some attachment to Rose, there isn't really that much, since she hasn't really said much up until this point in the show. This is literally one of the only episodes she says anything really until I think Reflector, which is a bit later on in the series. So it's a bit boring. It's kind of funny with the perfume stuff. It's then like Chloe smelling horribly. It's okay, it's alright. But I think one of the reasons I personally quite like Miraculous is the class dynamics and the interactions between the different children, not just Adrian and Marinette, with the whole class. And there wasn't really much of that, despite a lot of this episode being set at DuPont. There wasn't much of it, so I was kind of disappointed by that. However, it was intriguing in that Marinette, now at the end of series 3, is the new guardian of the Miraculouses. So I'm just wondering, did first of all Master Fu teach her how to heal Kwame's, and second of all, what if Plague gets sick? He's gonna have to get Adrian to take him to Marinette so he can be healed. So, I mean, obviously they don't have to explore that, but I was just like, oh, that's very interesting that she's now the guardian of the Miraculouses. Up next is The Mime, and honestly this episode was kind of boring. The only reason it's here on the list is because there was some good development with Marinette being a good friend to Mylène, as well as Chat Noir coming through in the clutch. He really gives it his all in some of the fights in series 1 Miraculous. Especially like towards the end, so a lot of the people are on this tour bus, it's heading for the Eiffel Tower. Chat Noir throws his baton and like leans back on it between these two bollards. He really goes for it, so I think that's probably why this one's so high, because of more of the like animated action sequences in The Mime is really cool. There's also a really cute bit with the pigeon at the start. I love pigeons, sorry. So up next, and this is kind of like the middle of the list, so the past few I've said and this one, the next few are kind of the middle ground, they're much better episodes, but up next is Lady Wi-Fi. Now first of all, this episode has a bit of a stupid premise in my opinion. It's just like, Chloe, how on earth can you get Alia suspended for taking a picture of inside your locker? Like, it is a bit silly, and I think some of the episodes of Miraculous do have this kind of similar stupid tenuous premise as to how the person gets akumatized in the first place. So I think it's an okay episode, and I think Alia is really well written as an Akuma villain. I'm terrified of Alia without being akumatized. The kind of girl I would have been terrified of at 14. What am I saying? At 14, now at 24, I'd still be terrified of a girl like Alia, to be honest. Even if they were 14 and I was 24, I'd still be terrified. I'm scared of children, okay? Some children I'm just scared of. However, again, there's another interesting thing that happened in this episode that I just want to comment on. In that a lot of people, I feel, again, who make Miraculous videos on YouTube, call Chat Noir useless, and that essentially it's about Ladybug and he's just kind of hanging around. And if you rewatch Lady Wi-Fi, I really don't feel like he is useless. A lot of series 1 episodes anyway show him as a really useful asset to the two-man team. Plus as well, if you think about it, Adrian and Marinette and Ladybug and Chat Noir, with the creation and the destruction and the way they are together in the box, I think it's like the yin and yang symbol, which is about balance in life. So whilst Marinette is really clumsy and feels like she gets bad luck, she does have a fairly happy life. And on the other hand, Adrian is locked away and lonely and sad in his bedroom. However, he does have an extremely privileged life, so in their civilian forms, they're the complete opposite of each other. However, as Ladybug and Chat Noir, the roles are reversed. Like, it's meant to be like that. He's meant to kind of come off as useless, because in everyday life, Marinette feels useless. That's kind of where they are with these two. They're meant to be opposites. They're not meant to be as good as each other. They're meant to be different. Like, just lay off him. I love Chat Noir. Up next is Kung Fu. Now, before we get into my thoughts and opinions on this episode, I just wanted to put it out there, just ask, is this episode, with more of the name than anything, racist? I don't know. I am not Chinese, nor do I actually know. That's a lie. I know one Chinese person, but they were my Mandarin teacher. I didn't think it was appropriate to ask them about Miraculous Ladybug. So I simply do not know if this episode is racist or not. I'm not sure. Chloe is obviously racist in the episode towards Marinette's uncle. However, I feel like that's more of a character choice and not the writers being racist. So I'm not talking about what Chloe says. I'm talking about the name of the episode. Is this kind of more maybe cultural appropriation? I'm not 100% sure. So I just wanted to acknowledge that before we move on with my thoughts on Kung Food. I'm not 100% sure if it is. So we're just gonna move that to one side. If that is an issue, then obviously this episode should never have existed in the first place. But I just wanted to say it. So if we move that aside and we kind of look at this episode objectively without the racism, but let's acknowledge that there might have been something playing into this. But I do think this episode is pretty good. We get some really good Adrien and Marinette interaction where she doesn't stutter that much. I really enjoyed this episode for that. And we also, on top of that, got more information about Marinette's family, which we hopefully will anyway when we get to see the Shanghai special, which I'm assuming it's going to be some point in 2021. I doubt it's going to be before Christmas at this rate, which, speaking of which, I don't think the next series of Miraculous, because it got pushed back due to COVID, is due to air until September 2021. And let me tell you now, I do not have enough Miraculous Ladybug video ideas left to last me until then. So we're gonna have to improvise and do something until September. I'm doing like one Miraculous video a month. I don't think I have enough ideas left until September, I'm sorry. I also really like this episode in the way they kind of fought their way up the hotel. So the way they like fought their way up the hotel with the mayor, then with Alec, and then with Ali's mum, whose name I've conveniently forgotten as well. That was a really cool way to do it as well. That was a really cool way to have the fight in this episode. Up next is Roger Cop, and can I just say, we don't have a career day like this in the UK where you bring in your parents, they talk about their careers. It doesn't really happen, or at least not at my school anyway. I've never heard of it at anyone else's school either. However, it just seems like it's a day perfect for drama, especially when you have Chloe Bourgeois in your class. Like, why would you even entertain that? Why would you let her bring her dad, who is the mayor of Paris, into school? Like, I would just say, Chloe, you don't have to do this today. Just go home. We all know you don't like school anyway. But I did find it kind of funny. There were some really funny moments how, for example, when Chloe gets in Roger Cop's car, it starts flying. She doesn't even bother questioning it. She's just sat there like, oh, we're in a flying car now. Okay, this is good, this is fine. She doesn't question it in the slightest. And also the caretaker at DuPont, which I believe is Milen's dad in the mime. He's also the caretaker. He's also like the security guard of the school. Caretakers at my high school didn't care what you do as long as you didn't make a mess. They would have to clean it up. You could bring like 5 criminals into the school, and as long as they didn't drop litter, they would not care. He did kind of feed into my enjoyment of this episode because he was kind of funny. Up next is Darkblade, and I actually really like this episode. First of all, Mr. Dagencourt, I don't think I'm saying that right, I'm sorry, the fencing teacher, the guy who gets akumatized, is really funny. Like, he's been in it more times. You see him like in the background as Adrien's fencing teacher. But I don't think he's ever really said anything before, to be honest. This is the only episode where he speaks. And that man is hilarious. Give him some more lines. He's so funny. He was great. I really enjoyed this episode because of that. And also Chat Noir, he really comes into his own because obviously he's Adrien and Darkblade is about sword fighting and he can sword fight. He was doing it with his baton. He really went for it. I've really enjoyed this episode for Adrien, to be honest. And once again, also, the caretaker being the real MVP of Miraculous. I thought Natalie was the MVP of Miraculous. I am wrong. It's Milen's dad. He is the MVP of Miraculous Ladybug. And also, I don't think this was ever mentioned again, so Darkblade is the episode where they vote on who's going to be the class rep. And first of all, we get to see Marinette as being a great leader. We get to see the Ladybug come through in her, which I think is something that needs to happen more often. But I think more so for Adrien and having the Chat Noir come through in him in real life, sort of. So that was really good. However, with the class rep stuff, I'm pretty sure this has never been mentioned since. So I'm just wondering, just putting it out there, is there going to be further drama, possibly with maybe they have to run for class rep again, they need a new one, and Lila's going to get it this time? Like, what havoc is she going to wreak on Adrien and Marinette's lives if Lila becomes class rep? Because they just have to sweep this under the rug, never mentioned the class rep, I'm pretty sure, since this episode. So I'm just wondering what's going to happen with that. If they bring it back, they might not do anything with it since all these episodes are more of standalone episodes, so they don't tend to follow on from each other like that. But just a thought, an interesting thought, something the writers are maybe gonna do for one of the next series. Up next is Time Breaker. Now Time Breaker is when Alex gets akumatized, and it's the first of 3 time travel episodes we get in the full show so far, with Time Breaker being the first one, Time Tagger being the second, and Chat Blanc being the third one. However, Time Breaker, despite the time travel, isn't confusing in the slightest, which is great from both a writer standpoint and a viewer standpoint, because time travel, but especially because Alex goes back and forth a few times, can be pretty confusing, so that was great. And I also just adore Alex as a character. Both young Alex and older Alex, just in general, I adore them both as characters. I love Alex so much. I also have to ask, I'm pretty sure Mr. Cubdale, Alex's dad, said the watch is a gift you get on a certain birthday. I can't remember what age Alex was it 14, 15, I'm not sure. He gives it to Alex and I was like, hold on, does that mean Jaleel has had this watch? Or did you not give it to him? Like, for what reason? And third of all, did it also mean you and Jaleel have both been in the Bunnix costume? Like, I would pay to see that. That would be hilarious. I want to see what you look like in the Bunnix costume. Or your, I guess, incarnation of the Bunnix costume. I think that'd be really fun to see. Up next is Horrificator, and I really like this episode because again we get some Adrien and Marinette interaction, we get some class dynamic interaction, we get to see the children in the class not only communicating with each other on a more regular basis without adults being around, but we also get them to see them work together to save Mylène, which I think is really cool. And Ivan is an absolute sweetheart. Ivan is an unsung hero of Miraculous Ladybug. I can't wait till he gets given his Miraculous, which I'm pretty sure is going to be the Ox Miraculous in a future episode, because I do really like Ivan after rewatching Horrificator a couple of times now. Also this episode we get to see an interesting side to Julika, that she's not afraid of pretty much anything, which I think is a really interesting character development for her, since she literally does nothing this series apart from in Reflector, to be honest. And also, since we are talking about Horrificator, that is the episode when Adrien and Marinette are about to kiss and Adrien and Chloe are about to kiss. We just have to compare the two visuals, but you could obviously see Adrien is a lot more comfortable with Marinette. Like, you can't tell me he doesn't have feelings for her. I'm sorry. Like, no, I will not be accepting any constructive criticism on that at this time. Sorry. Next up is Dark Cupid, and I think this is probably for a while one of my favourite episodes of Miraculous Ladybug, just because of obviously the kiss scene and also the implications of that. So earlier on in the episode they are talking about, I think, Sleeping Beauty in class or some other kind of fairy tale, in where, like most fairy tales, a kiss, love conquers all, and it's about how true love can break the spell. So to me, when Ladybug kisses Chat Noir, it's obviously true love, even though she believes herself to be in love with Adrien, not Chat Noir, obviously not knowing they're the same person. So it obviously does show that she truly is in love with him, and to me true love means like forever, soulmates, they're meant to be together in the end. And even Master Fu says at the end of Stoneheart when he's with Waze, his Kwame, that those two are meant to be together. And Master Fu is so right, he's got it right there. Also, Kim is an absolute savage in this episode towards Chloe. I love Kim so much. I wish so much Kim got more screen time for his character. I think he's hilarious. I would also just like to question here though, the poems that are written in the episode. So the one Adrien writes for Ladybug but throws it away, and then the one Marinette writes back to him. These poems, again, like the class rep stuff, like the history book, I just never followed up. And I understand the show is for children. Not all children, like an adult, would watch all the episodes in the right order. They will just watch it when it's on telly and then not think about it much afterwards. I get it for that. But these poems, which seem just pivotal moments for both of their characters, I just never followed up again, and it's just like a bit of a, again, like the history book, like the class rep, a bit of a lost opportunity in my opinion from a writer's perspective. Up next we have the penultimate episode of the series, which is Antibug, the episode where Chloe of course gets akumatized. From a writer's perspective, I really like the opening of this episode because it starts with Sabrina already being akumatized, so we don't see how she gets akumatized till later on. We don't know the cause of her akumatization till later on as well. So it was something different and it did work. I did really like this episode for that. And also it was something different in that Ladybug was the one causing the Akuma, not Chloe, since she like causes about half of the Akumas in the whole show, not just series 1, like literally about half of them is Chloe's fault. Like, it's Chloe. Yeah, no other words are needed for Chloe. Up next, we knew it had to be a lot higher on the list, is of course the one, the only, Mr. Pigeon. First of all, yes, I do love pigeons, so yes, I'll admit it now, I was biased against this episode because I do love pigeons. But I do genuinely think this is a really good episode, just because of how daring they were with the pigeon. They didn't hold back, they just went for the ridiculousness of it. They fully embraced it. I thought it was really good, and even if you don't like pigeons, I thought it was quite an enjoyable episode on its own. And also, Officer Raincompré is absolutely hilarious when you start shouting at Mr. Ramier at the Eiffel Tower, or is he at the Trocadero? I'm not sure which end he's at. Wherever he's feeding the pigeons, I think it was at the Trocadero. The only thing I have to question is when Marinette wins the hat competition. Gabriel says on the FaceTime on the tablet that Adrian will wear it for his next photo shoot, and actually his next photo shoot is the episode after Stormy Weather. And he doesn't wear it. He doesn't wear it till Style Queen, I don't think, in series 2, so lies. Thank you, Gabriel Agreste. Complete lies. Up next is Reflect, and honestly the premise of this episode, a bit like some of the others, is a bit tenuous in that, I mean, honestly, at my school, unless someone was ill and they knew for certain they weren't coming in on picture day, they would not take a picture without somebody present in the picture. They just wouldn't. So I do think the premise of this episode is a little bit tenuous, but that's neither here nor there, as I do think it's a well written and enjoyable episode with everyone looking like Juleka in the heels and all the random heel and looking like a girl and nails instead of claws jokes Ladybug makes. You see some really good fun interaction between her and Chat Noir, and it's really enjoyable. They have really good chemistry, and in my opinion it's really enjoyable to watch them together like that. Up next is The Puppeteer, and this episode, a bit like some of the others, was something a bit different, as for the first time in the show a child is akumatized. Now of course everyone in Marinette's class are also children, however it's like a literal child, not a teenager, an actual child when Manon gets akumatized. However, I must say it is kind of confusing what Adrian is allowed to do. Like in Timebreaker he goes to watch a rollerblading race, and in this one he manages to get on the subway to actually go to the cinema, not that he gets there. However, at the start of the show, in the Origins episode anyway, he's not even allowed to go to school, so it's like, what are you actually allowed to do, Adrian? You're allowed to go to the cinema, you're allowed to go to school, make your mind up. It's a bit confusing for me. But I did think the overall idea of the episode was really cool in how Manon was using the puppets to control. I think she was controlling Adrian, Alia, Officer Raincompré and Nathaniel, and almost eventually Ladybug as well. I thought it was a really cool idea with the puppets, and also the fights in that episode having 4 kind of extra villains was a really cool idea, and the fight sequences ended up being really, really cool from a viewer's perspective. Up next, Eve Illustrator, and we're breaking into the top 4, top 5 episodes now. So Eve Illustrator is a really good episode. Again, this episode was something a bit different because Nathaniel does disobey Hawkmoth. He doesn't really care for getting the Miraculouses, he just wants to go on a date with Marinette. So whilst I don't hate this episode because of Nathaniel's feelings for her, because obviously Marinette doesn't reciprocate those feelings, it's a genuinely really good episode. I really enjoy it because the other akumatized villains usually do what Hawkmoth wants, but Nathaniel doesn't want to do that. He just wants to go on a date with Marinette, and I think it is kind of sweet and nice in comparison to Animan, where Nino was just being a bit weird about it in my opinion. But in this episode I do think it's interesting in that we get to see that Hawkmoth can actually harm his victims, and I think he does it again in Pixelator, like I said, but then after that I don't think it ever happens. So I did think that was an interesting touch in this episode. It's just a bit odd that it never happens afterwards. But like I said, I do think Eve Illustrator is a really enjoyable episode. Next up at number 3 at the top of the list is Stormy Weather. Now like I said, when you sometimes Google Miraculous Ladybug, Stormy Weather will show as episode 1, but when you watch it on the UK Netflix, The Bubbler is episode 1. And if they seriously did not want the Origins to come first, if they wanted to do something different, Stormy Weather should have been the first episode, because first of all, let me tell you now, because even though you have absolutely 0 emotional attachment to the girl who gets akumatized, whose name I can't pronounce, is it like Aurora? I'm not sure. It has an amazing fight sequence, an amazing reason for her to get akumatized. It's a huge loss to Aurora as well, so the reason for the akumatization isn't tenuous. There are fewer characters, really good action, and we also get a good background to Adrian and Marinette. I think when I watched the show the first time I was like, ugh, watching the Bubbler but then I don't think I was doing much, so I forced myself to watch Stormy Weather, and I really enjoyed it. Because I tell you another reason why I enjoyed this. When they're on the top of the TVI station and Shatnar does his cataclysm, the transformation music plays. And you know in Miraculous Ladybug that when the transformation music plays, but there's not a transformation going on, then something's about to go down, and it did go down. The action sequences in Stormy Weather are some of my favourite out of all 3 series of the show and the New York special as well. Stormy Weather is amazing. And if they didn't want to have Origins first, they should have had Stormy Weather first and not the Bubbler. They really need to switch them around on Netflix because the Bubbler is not a good introduction episode at all. Up next is Volpina. Now, do I like Lila as a character, as a person? Would I want to be friends with her? No. As a character though, Lila is amazing. She's been brought in such a good way, and we also, another reason why I like this episode, the interaction between Adrien and Marinette. Like I said before, any episode with Adrien and Marinette interaction in are usually the best episodes of Miraculous Ladybug, and I stand by that. Volpina is a really good episode for that. Lila's a great villain to have. I can't wait to see more of her in the future. She's really good in future series as well. And again, it was something different in that Ladybug caused the Akuma this time as well, like in the previous episode in Antibug. Some of these top episodes we're getting to, it really does show more of the character development with Marinette and Adrien, and also their relationship development as well. Now, the top 2 spots. The last episodes we have are Origins and Stoneheart, which go together. Obviously when one ends the other one is meant to start, that's how they work, they're meant to be in sequence with each other. But I couldn't decide which one was better than the other because I think these 2 episodes are the best. Like I said before, if they didn't want to start with the Origins, they should have started with Stormy Weather instead of the Bubbler. However, in my opinion, they really should have gone with these Origins episodes because these episodes are absolutely solid. Like, when you start watching The Bubbler, for me, not knowing anything about Miraculous going into this, it's because I was bored and my friend recommended it to me, I was so confused. Like, what on earth is a Kwame? Like, at the start of the episode, Adrien and Marinette are just chilling in their rooms. Then this little red or black bug, like, comes up and starts talking to them. I was like, oh, okay, so we're doing this now? It was kind of confusing and jarring. And also in terms of Origins, it does kind of like spoil it for you. And at the end of Origins, Marinette takes out her earrings and says she doesn't want to be Ladybug and puts it away. Like, we already know she carries on. So it would have just made sense to me to start with Origins and then have the rest of the episodes afterwards in a different order. Like, it just makes sense to me. The episodes are so good. Ivan and Milen are great. I really like Ivan and Milen as a couple. They're so cute together. And I really want them to come back in like any big finale episodes of a season because they were such a catalyst into how Adrien and Marinette became Ladybug and Chat Noir. And speaking of Adrien and Marinette, we also get to see a lot of their background into their struggles in life. So with Adrien with his dad and Marinette and being unlucky and kind of being bullied at school by Chloe. I think it's just a shame, like, why didn't they start with these episodes? They're really, really good. And obviously that umbrella scene at the end of Stoneheart will forever be iconic in my heart, and I'm sure in the hearts of many Miraculous Ladybug fans. It's just great, and Adrien quite obviously fancies Marinette. Like, just somebody shake the boy by the shoulders and tell him who he has feelings for. Because it's getting annoying at this point. Like, how can you be this stupid for this long? Like, I didn't know it was possible. Anyway, that is all the episodes ranked. Let me know what your favourite episode from Series 1 is, your least favourite episode from Series 1. I'm intrigued to know. But I think that's all for today. Like I said, none of the episodes are bad episodes, just some aren't as good as the others. None of them are terrible, but there are definitely some that I enjoy more than others. So I'm eager to know what you all think. So I will see you all next time, and I hope you all stay safe. Bye!